By the time Lena realized the stair counted to 13 only when she was alone, the landlord's keys were already warm in her pocket. In front of other people, the basement steps behaved, 12, neat and regular, ending at the door to Unit B. But when the hallway emptied and the light flickered, her shoe found a lower tread that hadn't been there a second before, a 13th step that felt damp as a tongue. The lease was a week-to-week, the kind people signed when they needed somewhere yesterday. Lena needed somewhere yesterday. She didn't ask why the rent was cheap. She didn't ask about the bulging paint along the cinderblock corridor, or the way her phone switched itself to no service as soon as the landlord shrugged and left. Unit B smelled like shut windows and a wet coin. She opened all the cabinets. One of them had a tiny pencil mark inside, 4 vertical tallies and a slashed 5th. Someone had been counting. The neighbor upstairs, someone with careful shoes, dragged furniture at odd hours. Water pipes sighed like sleepers. A fluorescent hum threaded through everything so tightly it felt like a thought she couldn't finish. The thermostat blinked 68. The oven clock blinked 3:07. The microwave agreed 3:07. Her phone did not. 8:42 p.m. it insisted, bright and certain, as if daring the apartment to argue. On her second trip up for boxes, the stairwell behaved. 12 steps, the hallway light was steady. When she came back down alone with the last box pressed to her ribs, her foot found the soft give of a tread that hadn't existed a heartbeat earlier. She looked down. There was only concrete, then air, but her shoe sank, came away damp. She said aloud, because silence felt like permission, no. The word didn't sound like her. It sounded closer, pulled thin, like it had been spoken just behind her ear after traveling the length of the hall. In Unit B, she put the last box on the counter. Someone had written on the underside of the laminate with a ballpoint pen and impatience. Do not store anything under the stairs. She hadn't planned to. She pretended it made her feel better. The oven clock, she noticed again, still blinked 3:07. She unplugged it. When the plug touched the outlet again, the numbers kept blinking without the cord. The hum got louder. The apartment waited, the way a held breath waits for a door to open. Lena set her phone to record and opened her door to the hall. The concrete smelled like rain that hadn't happened. She counted the steps down in a whisper. 1, 2, 3. Her whisper counted 2. But when she reached the landing, the recording caught a 13th number she hadn't said, soft and late, spoken in her own voice. She told herself the building was just old. Old buildings creaked, hummed, held on to air the way attics held on to summer. She showered to wash off the moving day grit and fogged the mirror so completely it turned to milk. In the blank white, a perfect oval cleared, as if a mouth had pressed to the glass and exhaled. The oval was too high for her height. It hovered where a taller person would breathe. She didn't scream. She wiped the mirror with the heel of her hand and laughed badly at herself. The laugh returned from the ceiling a half-second late, thinner, like it had passed through something that strained it. In the kitchen, the cabinets whispered on their hinges. The 5th tally in the pencil mark cluster had been pressed hard enough to dent the wood grain. On the counter, a ring of moisture she hadn't left shaped itself into a circle the size of a glass, then, in a draftless room, smudged into an oblong, like a finger dragging. 3:07, she thought, without meaning to. The numbers weren't a time anymore, they were a place. She flicked on her phone camera and swept it across the hall. The screen showed a flat concrete corridor, ending in the steel fire door. But when she paused on the staircase, the phone's digital image shivered, as if remembering a different version of itself. For a shutter twitch, the landing stretched, an extra half-flight down, a dark square yawning where there should have been wall. Another door, at a wrong angle, appeared and vanished between frames. Her chest tightened. She scrubbed backward through the video. The frames were normal. Her thumb hovered over a non-existent proof. At 10:13 p.m. by her phone, 3:07 by anything plugged into the wall, she heard the upstairs neighbor drag something heavy from one end of the ceiling to the other. The sound cut out mid-scrape, like a needle lifted from vinyl. After that, only the building's breath. She lay on the mattress on the floor and watched the shadow of the door under the hall light. It didn't move. That was somehow worse. When sleep finally found her, it didn't last. She woke to a knock, not on her apartment door, from beneath it. 3 short knuckles tapped from the other side of the threshold, floor level, as if a hand lay flat on the concrete hall and rapped upward. Lena held still and did not trust the part of her that wanted to look. She whispered, "No," again, because last time that had been enough to make the hallway answer. This time, the knock answered back with the rhythm of her word. No. 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 Each reply came just slightly late, like an echo trapped in a room the size of a stairwell. Morning, which her phone swore arrived, did not fully reach the basement. The light that filtered down the stairwell found dust and stopped, as if reluctant to dirty itself on the concrete. Lena made coffee and stared at the underside of the counter. Do not store anything under the stairs. She thought about the 13th step. How do you store anything in a place that isn't always there? Outside, the landlord's voice on the intercom was a placeholder for an apology. Any issues? He asked, cheerful in a practiced way. She almost said, no. She said, is there another unit down there? She meant it to be a joke. It did not land as one. The intercom clicked, then smoothed back to charm. Just you in the basement, B. Everyone else is above ground. Call if you need anything. When she hung up, her phone screen showed her fingers pale and shaking. Behind them, the camera still aimed at the hall. The image had lingered at the edge of a glitch. For a breath, she saw it. Not a second unit, exactly. A second angle of the same one. The hallway folded like a paper model, and at the crease a door existed only in the fold. She had chalk in a drawer from a box of picture hangers. She took a stick, soft and coward white, and drew a line across the landing. If the 13th step liked to arrive when she was alone, she would leave something to answer to. The chalk lay there like a promise. She went back inside. She counted aloud to make noise. 1, she said, touching the first tread with her toe. 2. At 12, her foot met the ground. At 12.5, no tread to see, and yet her shoe landed on something that held her weight and felt like a breath held between teeth. She did not look down. She looked at the chalk line. It had moved. No, worse. It had been redrawn, a duplicate in her own hand's impatience, an inch farther into the dark. She dropped the chalk. It rolled down and disappeared, not by falling off a step, but by being allowed in. There was the faint, skin-prick sound of something writing on concrete from the other side. Back in Unit B, she pulled the bottom drawer of the kitchen cabinet all the way out. The base of the cabinet wasn't a single sheet of thin wood. There was space beneath. She wedged her phone, light on, into the gap and hit record. The footage showed only darkness. Then, jerk, her own eye, a reflection in something glassy. She froze the frame. It wasn't glass. It was paint, so high gloss it filmed a mirror. A painted door panel. The camera had seen a door under her kitchen. She dragged the fridge away from the wall with the determination of someone refusing to be reasonable. Behind it, old paint lines drew rectangles where appliances had been, and in the void where wall met floor, the faintest outline of a frame ran along the baseboard. A door's shadowed seam. A door at the size and height for someone who preferred crawling. The apartment breathed, pleased with her progress, the way a puzzle hums when one piece finds another. In the humming, a voice came, in the faintest condensation on the oven glass, letters unfogging in the room's barely there moisture. Knock back. She should have left. She knew that in the hard, practical part of herself that once made lists and rent envelopes and dental appointments a month early. But the longer she stayed, the more leaving felt like stepping off a stair that might be there if she believed hard enough. The building had wired itself into her timings. She knocked on the floor with the side of her fist. 3 short taps, like the ones from under her door. Silence. Then the reply came, hers. but thinner. No, no, no. Not no, she told the apartment softly, like scolding a dog that wasn't hers. Tell me something else. Silence pressed its ear to the wall and listened. She fetched the chalk and, on the kitchen tile, wrote Lena in block letters, childish and deliberate. On the oven glass, a fog oval cleared. Letters formed back, not by moisture but by absence, as if the room were deciding where not to fog. Lena. It had copied her, or learned her. Who are you? She asked aloud. There was no word in return, but the 13th step arrived, and that felt like an answer. She turned on her phone's flashlight and wedged herself under the cabinet lip, shoulder jammed, ribs scraping. The painted panel under the counter was not a door she could open. No knob, no hinges she could reach. But paint remembers pressure. She pressed. The panel gave one tender, traitorous inch and stopped, as if something leaned back from the other side and matched her weight in a polite stalemate. Between paint layers, something smelled like old winter coats, a closet breath. Why 307? She asked. The microwave blinked it. The oven, unplugged, blinked it. The question hung. From the hall, footsteps crossed the concrete and stopped right outside her door. She stood and put her eye to the peephole. The corridor was empty. Still, the peephole image had shifted a hair right, like the door had been unscrewed and rehung a fraction of an inch off. The upstairs neighbor dragged something again. Mid-scrape, the noise faltered, like a hand reconsidering its strength. From directly above the peephole, a flake of paint fell and landed in the air between her face and the brass. It hovered where gravity should have been sure. Then, delicately, it drifted sideways and slid under the door as if on a very slight slope she could not see. She understood, then. The building wasn't haunted by a person. It was haunted by a version. A repeat of the same space, laid over itself like tracing paper that didn't align. In the layover, what belonged to one set of rules could trespass on the other if you knocked the right rhythm. Tell me your name, Lena said, and felt the foolishness of asking a room to be polite. From the floor, her own voice obliged, Lena, but the timing was wrong. The mouth behind the name was trying to say something else and had learned her shape as the nearest available alphabet. What if there isn't a name there? She asked the seam under the fridge. You can use mine. Something shifted happily in the dark, the way empty cupboards sound when you put a first bowl in them. On the 6th night, her lease's penultimate breath, Lena decided to do the one thing any horror movie warns against. She would open the door that wasn't a door. Not with force, with timing. She set every clock the room allowed to 3:07. She sat on the landing and waited for the step to arrive. When it did, she put her heel on the edge and felt the pressure of another heel pushing back from a place that needed hers to decide it existed. She knocked once. The reply came twice. Eager, she knocked 3 times. The reply made a mistake and answered 4. Close, she said, as if teaching a child, again. They learned each other's cadence. The seam under the fridge widened enough that cold air slid out. The clean kind of cold that lives behind freezers and in unused guest rooms. She put her fingers to the gap. Something like fingers arranged themselves on the other side, aligning knuckle to knuckle through paint and darkness. When she pulled, the panel didn't open, the room did. The kitchen stretched an inch, then a foot, then as far as a breath held for too long and finally let go. A second landing unfolded into the idea of the apartment, like a margin note becoming part of the text. For a slow second, she saw it clearly. Unit B, again, but not quite. The cabinets were the same but wore different dents. The tally marks under the counter were a few slashes more mature. On the oven glass, a name had been written and wiped and written again until the ghost of it coated the whole door. Not Lena. Not any name she knew. A shape of letters that looked like hers when you glanced quickly, and like a stranger's if you stared. Hello, she said into the seam. Her voice returned from a place nearly, not exactly, her own. Hello? What happens if I step through? She asked. The apartment considered. The 13th step pressed upward against her shoe, asking for weight. The neighbor upstairs, hers? Almost hers? Dragged something heavy and stopped above her head. In the stop was meaning, don't do that. Not because the other side was malicious. Because it was lonely and would refuse to let her go. Lena pictured herself learning to answer only in feedback, her letters becoming copies of copies, her name wearing down into whatever the other side needed. She thought of a week-to-week lease extended forever by a staircase that made one more math problem each time she tried to leave. She knocked once, gently, the way you do on the lid of a sleeping pet's carrier so it knows you're still there. Then she pulled the fridge forward with all the human petty strength she had and let the panel snap shut. The room shuddered. The 13th step flattened into a sigh that hadn't lived in lungs for a long time. The lights steadied, the clocks blinked, blank. A sound rose from the floor. The sad, relieved scrape of furniture finally dragged to the place it was always meant to be set down. Above, the neighbor exhaled like someone who had been holding a door for too long. Lena packed. She did not look under the stairs, she did not record. She wrote a single new line under the counter's warning, and do not knock back. When she turned in her keys, the landlord tried for cheer again and failed. Everything all right? Yeah, she said, and meant no. The steps are weird. He blinked too slowly. Only 12 down there, he said, almost automatic. His smile flinched, as if noticing its own echo. That night, in a different apartment with windows that confidently belonged to the sky, Lena woke at 3:07 for no good reason. Her phone showed the correct time. The oven didn't blink. The walls didn't hum. But from somewhere in the muscle memory of her own hands, she felt it. A tiny tap, 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 like knuckles finding wood through paint. She did not answer. The quiet that followed was grateful and heavy, like a door resting against its frame on the safe side of a hinge.